I'm Vance Bastian, here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 29. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing A.C. Burch's series, The HomePort Chronicles, and which leads into his recent release, The Distance Between Us. Then we'll move on to this week's review of Netflix's Nimona, and then we'll share what's got our attention this week. Now, on to our guest. A.C. Burch loves to explore the diverse circumstances of individual lives. His storytelling revolves around the themes of identity, sexuality, and personal evolution, often focusing on those who live outside the margins of conventionality. A.C. Burch spends his leisure time gardening, capturing life's moments through the camera lens, and sailing Cape Cod Bay on his sloop, Nepenthe. A vocal advocate for diversity and freedom of expression in literature and the performing arts, he splits his time between Provincetown, Massachusetts, and South Beach, Florida. AC, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. So, where did that creative spark start? And it sounds like you have a really good life, so I want to hear a good story.
No pressure there. I've worked hard to get to a really good life, I guess is the way I would say it. I
Fair.
grew up in a small town south of Boston, Massachusetts, that I would describe as a combination or of Hooterville from Petticoat Junction and whatnot, and Deliverance. It was not a good place for me to be as a kid. And so
The children are now Googling that.
Yeah.
What's Petticoat Junction?
Oh dear, maybe. Well, I hope they look at that. I hope they skip Deliverance. Yeah, and Green Acres too.
Yeah,
they used
there
the
you go.
town in both series. So, as a very young kid, like fifth grade, I wrote a story, and it was about a pilot, and he worked for the Modell Aviation Company, Modell.
Okay.
And I was really proud of it. And I gave it to my English teacher, who was also the elementary school coach. I came back marked in red with the second L, sliced off in red, which meant that I was writing a story about someone who flew inside a model airplane. And I
Right.
remember looking at it and saying, idiot. And every time I see a Modell sporting goods store, even 50 years later, I still say idiot. So that kind of shut me down. I went on to do a lot in music and performed all over the place and did all sorts of things like that. And I got to a music school in Connecticut, and I came out over those years. I have a younger sister. And when I was in high school, there had been a scandal. And I'm going to try to be very delicate in my wording here. A very bizarre librarian, to begin with, discovered two young men in what I would basically describe as adolescent sexual exploration. She walked in on them and went nuts. She pulled a Gladys Kravitz. I mean, she just went crazy. And the upshot of it was that she told everybody. The administration bungled the whole situation, expelling one of them and forbidding the other to attend gym class, which was something I actually wished they would have done for me, was prevent me from going to gym class. So with that backstory, I'm in I think it was my third year, maybe my final year in music school. And I came back to see my sister in a school play. And this individual's younger brother was also in the play. And so, there's the usual intermission, the Mayberry thing where they're selling brownies in the school cafeteria and all that good stuff. And what happened was I walked into the cafeteria to find just about everyone huddled in the far corner. And the way I remember it is if a herd of deer had been confronted by a lion. They were all cowering. And I looked to my right to see why they were all pushed over to the side. And there standing was the individual who had been expelled, who had transitioned. And she was standing there in a white pantsuit. I can see this to this day, in a white pantsuit, long black hair, holding a bouquet of roses, staring at them and crying. And I was stunned, and I did not have the courage to go over and speak to her. I just sort of froze where I was and didn't do anything at all, which has bothered me to this very day. So that part happened, and then years go by, many many years go by, and I had the real privilege of being involved early on with a group that had its origins in Massachusetts called Gay Lesbian Advocates and Defenders at that time. And Mary Bonato was the lawyer who actually defended marriage and prevailed in the Supreme Court for marriage equality. But this was really early in that period. And they were talking about things like marketing and how to get your message out. And I mean, it was very, very early on. And she says something that really hit home: tell your story. Get out there, tell your story, talk to people, engage with them, take the chance, but tell your story. If we all tell our stories, it'll ripple like water. And that was really the genesis of that whole successful marriage equality movement. And that really struck me. And then I got to a point in my life where this story of this individual who had come back and bravely confronted people. I mean, the mocking, the abuse, the way the administration handled it, it was a tragedy. Came back and stood. That story just grew and grew and grew. And so when I got to a place in my life where I had pretty much wrapped up my musical performances, I was retiring from my job at a university, and I basically started to write again. And I began to write a story called the HomePort Journals, which I thought was the arrival of someone to my hometown since 1987 of Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is at the tip of Cape Cod. Not Providence, as many people think, which is in Rhode Island, but Provincetown, which you may know is a fairly popular gay resort and quite a beautiful place in and of itself. And I thought the story was going to be just about his arrival in Provincetown and finding a partner, and it just took off. And one of the characters that emerged early on was a character named Helena Handbasket. And you might have guessed she's a female impersonator. She was the Mrs. Danvers, essentially, of this big old Victorian manse where the young man found work. And out of Helena and the relationships that evolved came a story of what I like to call a chosen family. Some people call the found family, but I feel there's a little more proactiveness in that. So I consider it to be more of a chosen family. And so that's really how it all began, right from those episodes and just carrying through to now 2 books, the second of which features Helena in quite a big way.
I love that.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Is there anything you want to tell folks about the HomePort Journals before we jump into the distance between us?
Sure. So the HomePort Journals evolves around a young man named Mark Nugent, who's escaped an abusive relationship in New York City. And he's basically just gotten in his car and driven. And those of you that know Cape Cod, if you come into Massachusetts and you drive as far as you can go, you end up in Provincetown. It's the very tip of all things, a little tiny 2-mile community, empty in the winter, overflowing in the summer. And he arrives there and is taken in basically by an elderly Portuguese woman who is very feisty, very much at ease with gay men, which is the marvelous thing about the Portuguese community in Provincetown. There's what I call a Provincetown marriage. A lot of gay men for 100 years or more now have very close friendships with Portuguese women. And it's just this great relationship, and it's gossipy and it's lascivious, and I mean, there's no surprises. So he meets this woman who has actually been estranged from the owner of the mansion for years. She lives on the grounds of the estate, and she's been estranged. And so Mark, who is the fellow who escaped New York, he sets about trying to understand what is behind the estrangement and actually finds some old journals, hence the name, the HomePort Journals, and realizes that what has come between these 2 women is actually the fact that they are stepsisters, and their father has been accused, never convicted, but accused, basically in the eyes of society, of murder. And so they set about solving this some 80-year-old murder, which in turn brings the two women together and actually creates the genesis of the chosen family. And Helena plays a very pivotal role in that, both as a bit of comic relief, but also as sort of the glue that holds everyone together, the person that the family is built about. So that's book one.
Is Mark your investigator?
They all sort of are.
Okay.
He falls for this incredibly handsome artist who is somewhat of a recluse in himself, with a rather troubled past, and they have one of these attempts at relationships that misfire. But what happens is the triangulation between Helena and these two men actually works not only as a catalyst to solve the murder, but also to bring them together. So,
Okay.
there's a lot of romance and a lot of what it's like to be in Provincetown, which is a community that was isolated for most of its existence, more easily accessed by boat than by land.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of things that have sort of carried on here. It's a close-knit community. We look out for each other. We have violent weather. We had a horrific storm this winter that flooded out houses, and people had to be taken in. And I mean, it's a very close-knit thing. So he comes into that world, loves it, adopts it, and then this family kind of organizes out of that. So they really tackle the mystery as a unit, as a family unit.
Okay. And assuming the mystery gets wrapped up in book one, you've concocted a second one for book two.
Yes. This book, the distance between us, the way I sort of think about it is it's a cautionary tale with an embedded mystery. You could sort of say that the HomePort Journals has an embedded mystery, but this mystery had to, in the difference between us, had to serve a purpose. At the end of the HomePort Journals, Helena is very well situated. She's even met someone. She's living in the mansion. Life is good. And yet, with all the things that were going on in the country, I was sort of at a loss what to do. And people would always say to me, "You are writing a sequel, right?" And before I could say yes, they would say, "And Helena is in it, right?" So Helena had stolen the show in the first book. She just, so I knew I had to do something with her. But in order to present her with a challenge, she had to lose something. Something had to be taken to get back. And I came upon the notion that perhaps, and she's also having to fulfill bequests from the elderly woman who has passed. And so she's built a museum to house the art that's in the mansion, and she's trying to do right by all of these things. And so something had to be taken away, and she had to have this challenge, as I mentioned. So I set it up that there was defacement of the art in the museum, and there were thefts of art going on in town. And so then I made her, basically had her wrongly accused of murder. And that forced her underground to use her wit and her comic flair and her wardrobe to find the real criminals and basically save her good name and get the return to life as she once had it.
Very nice. Very, very nice. So as you were discovering your voice, did you weave any tropes together?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tales of the City and Armistead Maupin and stuff like that. So a lot of the things that he does in those books, where gender identity is just not an issue at all. It's just a matter. It's just a matter of common parlance. He doesn't belabor it. He doesn't do any. I use some of that, and then one of the things that I felt some real pressure, internal pressure, sort of not in a bad way, just sort of was bubbling inside me. I wanted to do something about all the nonsense that's going on in the country and the political divisiveness and the misinformation that many people have. I wanted to make a statement, but I'm involved enough with things to know that telling anybody something doesn't work. There's confirmation bias. The moment you start to say you should, the sound goes off and they don't hear you. So I wanted to use Maupin's devices to present things in just a regular way. And then I thought, but there's also some wonderful tropes in more classic literature, and I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. And if you dissect Pride and Prejudice, and of course, the movie Fire Island just did a retake of those tropes in many ways. But if you dissect Pride and Prejudice to a certain extent, what you find is that you've got a lot of social commentary in there, a lot of mocking of class difference and whatnot. Well, Provincetown is undergoing a huge transformation, like many places, between COVID, boomer retirement, what they call the Great Migration. We had people come here for COVID who have never left. They bought homes. Other people have retired to it. Property values have gone through the roof. There's no place for worker housing. There's a lot of friction. A lot of people have been forced out of apartments that have been turned into condos. There's a lot of class stuff going on. And many of the people that come here get it. And they're contributing and they're helping and they're doing what they can, to make things better. But there's some people that don't. So I thought, well, I should have a little fun with that. And certainly Jane Austen does. She has this feisty, strong heroine that everybody loves and feels so strong about in Elizabeth Bennet. And people are drawn to her and to her travails, and they root for her, and they really kind of get into it all. And then the thought came, well, what if my heroine wasn't a heroine? What if my heroine was a man who presents himself as a woman, which of course is so upsetting to so many. So I mind as much of Jane Austen as made sense to kind of play this little, have this little experiment about inviting readers in to the very things that typically draw them in, and then engaging those emotions of support and really rooting for the heroine, and basically hoping that of their own accord, they would say, well, gee, this is a wonderful, loving family. It's not a typical family. I've not seen it before. I don't understand it, but they're people. And so the trick for me was to try to present people living fully and authentically in their truth, and then just invite the reader in to do that. So the distance between us, the title of Chorus, has a lot to do with the reconciling of these differences in the backstory. And there are significant differences. If you're born on Cape Cod, especially on what they call the Outer Cape, which is the further reaches of the Cape, you're known as a townie. You could have come to Cape Cod the day they released you from the hospital. But if your family weren't townies, you'll never be a townie. You're what they call a wash-ashore. So there was a natural tension between the townies and the wash-ashores. And I could go on for hours about the crazy things that happen when those two forces intersect.
Right.
You'll find, someone expecting that everything that they got in New York City is going to be here in a 2-mile town that has one grocery store, and so there's all this sort of comedy. And of course, we also have a lot of people that come here to work from other countries. So we have a large Jamaican population that works here, and we have a large Bulgarian population that works here. So all of the differences and all of these things, which many times are very comic, all kind of went into the mix of stressing that kind of we're all the same, but look at how foolish we are when we think we're different. So that was pretty much that.
Nice. One more topic we should probably cover before I turn you over to our get to know you questions, just because it's a hot button topic today. What is the difference between a female impersonator and a drag queen?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Basically, the difference is, as I see it, is that the drag is very much an art form, a high art form. It's theater. It has a strong political component to it, and it very much is something that I see as totally performance oriented. Helena chooses to live and present as a woman, basically from the time she gets up. And there's a scene I really love in the book that goes through the transformation, and where she is getting ready and makes the necessary adjustments, and then looks in the mirror and says, "Good morning, darling. What are we going to wear today?" So that shift of personality. So, and a female impersonator often does very lifelike impersonations of sometimes famous people, but also may just impersonate, that feminine side of their persona. So that's sort of the distinction. Helena does great Betty Davis. She does a tremendous amount of Betty Davis. She's actually, does perform, and she does a phenomenal Judy Garland. And there's a whole scene where she's actually undercover, but shows up to do a charity benefit because she wouldn't let the people down, and does a fabulous Judy Garland routine. But mostly she's just living, she's living her truth. And the word impersonation kind of fails there a little bit, because she's not impersonating herself, she's being herself.
Right.
But she's not doing it in the highly theatrical, charged way that drag queens do. And I adore drag. It's routine to be walking down the street and there's a drag queen going by on a moped, or Miss Ridgefield is going by on a scooter, or Cher is walking down the street. It's so common in Provincetown that no one even takes a second look.
Right.
But I did want to make that distinction. At the same point, I did want to push back on all this negativity towards what folks are calling drag.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I hope that I use that vehicle of inviting people in to a place where the true humanity exists to make that point as well.
Beautiful. So what's up next for you? What are you working on? Or do you have dates you want to share with folks?
Sure. I just came off a great evening at Provincetown's performance venue, the Crown and Anchor. We had a wonderful night talking about the book and doing all of that. And this Thursday, I'm going to be interviewed by the author Jeanette de Beauvoir, who wrote books like Asylum and Deadly Jewels, and has a Provincetown mystery series. And she hosts a show on WOMR, which is also broadcast on the web on WOMR.org, called Arts Week. So I'll be doing an interview with her on Thursday. I think it airs at 12:30. I'm absolutely thrilled that Provincetown Magazine is excerpting The Difference Between Us.
Nice.
So I'm not sure of the publication date for that, but that will be out and available on the web. And I sort of planned my launch work and stuff like that to make sure I had time to go sailing. So things kind of slow down a little bit. But then in September, I'm going to be one of the featured authors at the Provincetown Book Festival, which is provincetownbookfestival.org. And
I love that.
I'm looking very much forward to that. They've got
Nice.
a great lineup building, and it's September 29th through October 1st. So that should be a lot of fun.
Perfect. Which site or social is the best for people to keep up with your updates?
Well, I keep everything sort of centered on acburch.com, acburch.com. So that's a good starting point. I've sort of backed away from Twitter a little bit recently, just with some of the nonsense that's going on there. Yeah, really.
Don't get me started.
Over it. Yeah, exactly. And since I like photographing things so much, and Instagram just seems well suited for that, I've been really trying to ramp up my presence there, doing a few more videos and reels, and I always make sure that whatever I'm doing is up there. And some people might tell you I do it too much, but I try to get it out to as wide an audience as I can. And I've kind of hung on to the Facebook thing. I have two separate sites there, AC Burch and AC Burch - Life on the Sandbar, which is where I tend to do more of the comic kind of things. And AC Burch Author is my handle on Instagram and Facebook. So you can search on that to find me there.
Perfect. Any final words of wisdom?
Well, it's not my wisdom, but yeah, I would say two things to everybody. Actually, three. Things are really weird right now, and they have been before, more than once, and we've prevailed and we've survived. And I guess what I would say, and again, this is not my wisdom, live fully in your truth and tell your story.
Mm-hmm. Love it. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to AC Burch for joining us. AC, thank you so much.
It's such a joy to be with you guys.
Yay! We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about these artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.